Hello, this is MTE Network speaking. Do you realize something? It's the 10th episode of Is It Real? For this special, we are going to do 2 creepypastas like the old days. 2 annoying ones, that is. Nevertheless, we're going to have an interesting time. So, here's the first creepypasta, SpongeBob's suicide. Yes, they did a SpongeBob one. Does anyone know the SpongeBob episode, The Sponge Who Could Fly, that aired in March 2003? It was dubbed the Lost Episode by its commercials based on the episode's storyline, where Patchy the Pirate uses a treasure map to find the SpongeBob episode that he lost. The night before the episode was aired, I was sick with the norovirus. I was vomiting almost every 5 minutes and I was feeling too ill to fall asleep, so I stayed up and watched TV. Around 2:30 a.m., my stomach started to settle, so I planned to turn off the TV and try to fall asleep. But as I was reaching for my remote control, the opening for the SpongeBob TV show started playing. SpongeBob was my favorite show at that time, so I couldn't miss out on watching it. Although I thought it was kind of strange that they were showing SpongeBob in the middle of the night. But I didn't think much of it. When the opening played, I noticed the contrast of the animation was slightly darker than usual, and the theme song sounded a bit harsh and raspy. This made me feel a little uncomfortable, but I also tried brushing that off. The title card read, Lost Episode, so I figured that there was a mishap and Nickelodeon was accidentally airing The Sponge Who Could Fly. When the episode started playing, it immediately looked out of the ordinary. It started off with SpongeBob sitting on his bed, slouched and looking downward with a somber look on his face. This was definitely not like himself. SpongeBob is so optimistic all the time. Why would he be acting like this? After about 10 seconds of seeing SpongeBob like this, he let out a big sigh, then looked over to his bedside barrel, and the screen zoomed in on a pill bottle that was sitting beside his clock. Once the screen zoomed in close enough to read the text on the bottle, it showed that it was a Prozac bottle. The show then panned to a scene with a much brighter contrast, showing SpongeBob taking one of his pills, then running off smiling and laughing. The fact that SpongeBob had to take pills to be, well, himself, made me feel uneasy, especially because mental disorders and antidepressants are more mature themes that obviously shouldn't find a place in any kid's cartoon. It should be noted that this was seen on a show intended for kids. The screen then flipped back to the original scene of SpongeBob looking distressed, while at the same time changing the contrast back to the darker one. The screen froze on SpongeBob for a few seconds, then flickered to a new scene. This scene showed SpongeBob at his desk, the same one that he was in the episode Procrastination, with his Prozac bottle, a piece of paper, and a pencil. In this scene, instead of staying at one contrast, the colors kept on flickering from light to dark. SpongeBob gripped the pencil in his hands, and a tear rolled down his face. The part that bothered me the most was that the tear didn't look like the usual blue cartoon-style tears the characters in SpongeBob usually cry out. This tear looked completely realistic, as if there had been a drop of water rolling down my TV from his eyes. SpongeBob wiped the tear from his face with his sleeve, and began to write on the paper, reading out loud. "I can't take it anymore," he said. As soon as he got that sentence out, a faint noise started playing in the background. It sounded like a child crying. This noise continued as SpongeBob continued writing. "My life has been horrible, and hasn't gotten better. My best friend, Patrick, is only my best friend because he doesn't know any better. My neighbor, Squidward, hates my guts. He would probably be happy if I wasn't around anymore." SpongeBob stopped writing and talking and started weeping loudly. The color flickering started getting faster. The cries in the background started getting louder. It sounded like more children were beginning to cry. It could have just been my imagination, but I remember hearing one of the children very faintly yell, "He's gonna do it!" The children's cries get louder, and the colors keep flickering faster as SpongeBob keeps writing. "The only job I can get is being the fry cook at the Krusty Krab. My boss, Mr. Krabs, refuses to give me an actual paycheck, and he basically uses me to get more customers. I'm in my 20s, and I still don't have my driver's license. Sandy is the only girl I've ever had in my life, and even she's just a friend. She's never had any interest in me. I'm pretty sure she's my only friend because she feels sorry for me. I'm sorry if I'm hurting anyone at all for doing this, but I just can't live like this anymore." The screen froze for a few seconds, Then the show continued with SpongeBob writing his final sentence. The contrast stayed dark instead of flickering from light to dark, and the children stopped crying. It was absolute silence, except for SpongeBob saying, "Goodbye." The cries came back. SpongeBob quickly stood up, twisted up the lid on the Prozac bottle, dipped his head back, let all the pills in the bottle fall into his mouth, and swallowed them whole. The screen twitched, and the animation was darker, but still visible. SpongeBob clutched his stomach and vomited realistic pale greenish-orange stomach bile. It was clear that his body was trying to cleanse itself from the overdose, but it was no use. SpongeBob collapsed onto the floor and lay there motionless until the screen turned to static. Needless to say, I was scared out of my mind, and sleep was out of the question. Recently, I've been looking for this episode all over the internet, but not even one website seems to have it. If you recognize this episode, please let me know. Jesus Christ, that was a very long creepypasta, and I have to read all of that! God dang! Nevertheless, this creepypasta is fake. First off, it claims that the SpongeBob episode was airing at midnight. At that time, it should have aired Full House and Friends. Don't believe me? Here's the schedule for the entirety of February to March at Nick and Night. Awesome! Furthermore, I highly doubt that this creepypasta was made by the same author who made Squidward Suicide. Therefore, this is stealing. A direct steal from Squidward Suicide, which isn't even a good creepypasta. Plus, if this episode was a thing, this would have been banned literally the next day. It would have reached a lot of news stations. Shall I go on? In conclusion, this creepypasta is fake, and it has to be one of the worst creepypastas I've ever read.
Objection! You think this creepypasta is bad? Well, wait until you see this one. This one is way worse!
Ah, my old friend Jay. What kind of creepypasta would be worse than SpongeBob's suicide?
I'm glad you asked that. This creepypasta is known as Enough is Enough, and it's a creepypasta of, get this, Loud House. Yes, they made a Loud House creepypasta.
God dang, they made a creepypasta about the Loud House? And here I thought the creepypasta about My Little Pony couldn't get any worse.
Hey, don't go disrespecting MLP like that. Well, anyway, enough stalling. Can you just read the bloody creepypasta now?
Okay, fine, I will. Jesus Christ, god dang, oh my god, little brony. Have you heard of this show called The Loud House? It's a series where a middle child, Lincoln Loud, has to survive in a family of 10 sisters. Yeah, that show. Well, what if I told you that I found an unreleased dark episode? Well, it happened to be a few days before writing this. It's a bit of a long story. I was surfing the web and came across this website of salvaged media known as Digital Fossils. It was a website that carried strange lost pieces of media that were either phone calls, security footage, images, deleted scenes of movies, etc. I had an interest in strange lost pieces of media, so I was curious enough to check out this website. The links were ordered as fossil, then followed by an uppercase word or short phrase with a few numbers. These words or phrases were sometimes nonsensical and unrelated to the website entry, and sometimes they made sense. For example, fossil, dog 807, fossil, help 9482, and fossil, don't look 370. Some of the entries on the website were slightly disturbing. For example, a recording of a cat playing with a dead bird, or a news report of a child going missing on an abandoned playground. I don't know how the website recovered these pieces of lost media, but it had almost everything that it could get its hands on. However, I stayed silent about that. I didn't work on that website anyways. However, as I scrolled down after seeing some entries, I found something that caught my eye. Fossil, Loud 11. It was rather interesting. It had a word that reminded me of the ones from earlier that were randomized, but it had 11 after it. It reminded me of Lincoln Loud, the same 11-year-old boy from the show I just talked about earlier. I clicked on the link and saw the description of the entry. The description says the following. This is the last episode of The Loud House, which is titled as Enough is Enough. It was meant to be the finale of the third season, but scrapped after its production was done. Chris will be planning another season 3 finale at the moment. However, this replacement is reasonable. This episode was lost for being too disturbing and dark for the series. If you are a fan of The Loud House, we must tell you that this is no joke. Viewer discretion is advised. I was curious. I wondered why would this be for a show like The Loud House to have such an episode like this. So after I downloaded it, I started the episode. When the episode started, the usual intro played. Nothing was wrong so far. However, in the end, nobody went to the couch to watch the TV. It didn't act like they were there as well, so Lily's poo-poo wasn't present. Another thing that was wrong was that the ending logo was tainted with the color of pastel red instead of orange. The website was not joking around. There was definitely something wrong with this episode. The title card had a black background with a white fog flowing across the left of it, with center to text saying, "Enough is enough." The bottom bubbles below show who made the episode as well, which was the same as the first two seasons. The music was a low, rumbling noise that was a little ambient, something you may hear in a horror game. The episode began with the outside view of the house, as it sometimes did. The music was absent, like the beginning of Brawl in the Family. It cut to Lincoln watching the television, instead of playing video games like he usually does. He was just chilling. "Don't you just hate living with 10 sisters?" "Well, sometimes I do," he said. I saw his smile turn upside down. "But on rare occasions, I go a little too far. I wish that they would just leave me alone, but I can't hurt them. They're my siblings. I want to love them, but the things they do are like a setback for me." Lincoln here sounded a little more serious than normal. "Hey, bro," Luann said as she appeared next to Lincoln in the next shot. "What did Platypus say before leaving the bar?" "Put it on my bill." Lincoln frowned as she laughed. "Yes, Luann, pretty fun. Do you want to smell my flower?" "I'm not falling for Luann's flower," sprayed water on Lincoln's face before he could finish what he was saying. "Okay, Luann, do you want some of my banana cream pie?" Luann said before slamming it on Lincoln's face. I wondered why the description said that this episode was too dark. Luann was making so many jokes that it made the episode more stupid than graphic. Lincoln facepalmed in dissatisfaction. "Stop, Luann, you're not funny. What do you call a boy who's completely white?" "A flower boy." Luann laughed for a little bit, but one shot later, Lincoln slid his hand off of his face, revealing his angry eyes. "Enough is enough," Lincoln said fiercely as he grabbed Luann by her shoulders. "Wow, nice grip, bro. You shoulder work out at the gym." Luann laughed at her little joke. Then something happened. It took me back to the shot of Lincoln. It felt as if I was hit by a train. Just after Luann laughed at her little joke, Lincoln slammed her head against the wall, bruising her and knocking her out. A low, ambient tune played in the background. Lincoln gasped and stared at the crack in Luann's head, and then at her purple bruised, unconscious body. He looked at his hands in fear. "What have I done? I've never done something like this before." He looked back at Luann, but this made me feel so alive. For some reason, I've never felt this good in a while. I know just what to do. I cut to black for 3 seconds, transitioning to Lori texting on her phone, possibly to Bobby. "Hey, Lori, can you drive me to the comic store?" "Ugh, just do it yourself or get your mom, Lincoln." Lori left the room, which I assumed was going to the bathroom, and Lincoln looked at her phone, which she left inside, glaring as he planned his next wipeout. One shot later, Lori was seen walking into her room when, "Lincoln, get out of my phone right now." Lori was hit on the head by her phone, as it broke with the shattering of glass. Lincoln walked over to her body and looked down on her. "This is for smashing my VR console, teenage brat," Lincoln said with silent anger, as it cut to Lori's lifeless body. Her phone was shattered, with bits of glass scattered across her face, being cut across some places. She was bleeding across her face on where she was cut. I was shocked to see the middle child go on such a killing spree like this. Why was this made, I thought to myself. I cut to black yet again, to change to a different scene, taking place in the backyard. "Hey, Lincoln, wanna wrestle?" "Sure, why not, Lynn? I'll bet I win this time." I knew this was going to be no wrestling match, but I kept on watching to see where it would go. As Lincoln was wrestling with Lynn, he got behind her, and shortly after, cut to a close-up of Lynn's eyes. Come at me, bro. Lynn's anticipation was cut short when she not only widened her eyes, but gagged. I knew something went wrong. The dark tune grew louder. It cut away from the close-up to show Lincoln choking his 13-year-old sister from behind. Not only that, but the animation quality changed to a style very similar to that of the King of the Hill. It looked so shocking that it didn't look as cartoony as before. I watched as Lynn gripped her brother's hands to break free. It was useless for her to escape. It cut to Lynn's point of view as she was turned around, face to face with Lincoln. This is when I felt like I was going to faint. Lincoln's face looked menacing, cold, and possessed at this point. His eyes were bloodshot, his pupils were larger, and his skin was a tad bit darker. The animation at this point went back to normal style, but his face was still highly detailed. Lincoln's pupils was the reflection of his choking sister, Lynn. I watched in shock as her vision went blurry, and her eyelids opened and closed. By the time she had her eyes shut, she was done. It was over for her. The gloomy music stopped. The next shot went to Lincoln sitting in the dark, with Lynn's body next to him. A different low tune played. Lincoln looked at his sibling's body with a pleasant sleep on his face. After 30 seconds, he spoke. "Sleep tight, Lynn. You're free." I got chills when he said that word. Lincoln had snapped, and he was no longer the man with a plan. He was now a corrupt soul. I wonder who's next for the axe. He wondered to himself as he looked up. With a planning smile, thoughts came to him. The video suddenly turned black and white. Lincoln pulled Lenny closer to him with a pair of scissors in his hand and glared at Lola with a bat in his hand. He was seen smashing Luna's guitar on her face and about to set Lucy on fire. It cut to black afterward. A line of white uppercase text spelling 1 week later faded in after 5 seconds. It was clear that 1 week had passed. It was nighttime again when the text and the black screen faded out. Lincoln was staring at the bodies of his now dead sisters, which were under his bed. To name a few of their fates, Lily choked on what I seemed as a small toy, and Lola was cut in the face multiple times. I'm not going into the rest of the sisters, though. My job is done. All I need is one more. But who is it? He said, looking around. Yes, it must be me. There was something I must do, Lincoln said before he looked down. As it cut to black for 10 seconds, Lincoln was now seen hanging from the ceiling, his back turned against the camera. I felt bewildered. All the little Loud siblings are dead, all because Lincoln had snapped, and it was all built up to this moment. Lincoln had to kill himself in order to join his sisters. Well, not all of her sisters. Just after a silent 12 seconds, Luann slowly got out of Lincoln's bed and panted heavily. It was a relief that she didn't die. Like I said way earlier, she was knocked down, not dead. Her wounds were still present. She was a bit pale, and a bit more blood had dripped down her face, but not entirely. She looked at Lincoln and back at her sisters, which were now lifeless corpses. "This is no joke," Luann said softly as she witnessed her first mass murder. She stood for a moment before leaping outside, possibly to tell the parents what happened. Afterward, the camera panned slowly to Lincoln's hanging body. Then it cut to a black room with Luann crying. Then she grabbed a needle and stabbed her eye out with a needle. Then she grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her in the stomach. Blood was flying everywhere. Then Luann fell to the ground. It faded to black, indicating the end of the episode. The credits had an eerie, ambient tune, and the background was the same white fog from the title card, black background, and moving left, but it lasted a little longer. As the credits stopped, the screen went black, and an echoing high tune rang for about 12 seconds. It gave me the willies. Afterward, the episode was finally over. Questions still rang through my head. Why was this made? What happened that led Chris Savino, the creator of the show, to make this? This episode had to have something to it. I just knew it had to. I tried doing some research on this certain episode, but nothing was found on this specific episode. I went to bed after spending 25 minutes of useless research, because no other website had anything of the episode. I still had some nightmares about that episode. Lincoln, standing there with his cold, angry, bloodshot eyes and overly detailed face. He did nothing. He just watched me as I slept. I always turned on my lights after those nightmares happened. I didn't want him strangling me, slamming me against the wall, whatever he could to do to end my life. I didn't go to Digital Fossils for a week because of that episode. That didn't mean I was done with it, though. I just hoped that I would, someday, find some info about this episode, like who suggested the idea for this episode. However, here was the real question. How did they get away with making such an abysmal episode?
Well, just like SpongeBob's suicide, this is a very long creepypasta. Anyway, if you couldn't tell already, this is very fake. For starters, this creepypasta claims that it was going to be the Season 3 finale. However, this was written in 2017, before Season 3 even started. Not to mention, it claims that Chris Savino had a plan for Season 3's finale. However, Chris was fired after the end of Season 2. What sense does that make? Another thing, the website Digital Fossils does not even exist in the way it's shown in the creepypasta. That screenshot is extremely fake. If we look at Digital Fossils for real, we get this page. This page is completely unrelated to the website shown in this screenshot. The screenshot is extremely fake and has no connection to the creepypasta whatsoever. As for the situations that occur in the creepypasta themselves, they are very unrealistic. I mean, let's think about this. When the first knockout with Luann happens, don't you think the parents would realize it eventually? I guess not in this creepypasta. It's just so convenient that they are not present in the creepypasta at all for this to happen subsequently. Not only this, but wouldn't the cops be called eventually if all the siblings got killed? Wouldn't at least one of them bother to do something about it? There are just so many things in this story that are way too convenient for this episode to be real. Oh, and don't forget, the website doesn't exist. Overall, this creepypasta is fake as shit, and is one of the worst creepypastas I've ever read. Worse than SpongeBob's suicide. And with that out of the way, I can end this episode of Is It Real? And now, back to MCE Network with the closing argument.
Oh, you think you're so cool just because he stole the show, eh? Whatever it is, what it is. But he gave out good points. That creepypasta was really horrible. Worse than SpongeBob's suicide. Thank you guys for watching the 10th episode spectacular for Is It Real? Thank you guys for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!